Yu-Gi-Oh, Beyblade, Metabots, Zoids. What do all of these have in common? Besides protagonists that individually make cosplay a goddamn nightmare, they all have an anime attached to them that you've probably at least caught a glimpse of growing up. Maybe you sat there on the couch precisely at the time it aired every week religiously, clutching your figures tightly as the Toonami bumpers rolled in.
Open up and say only Toonami.
Or maybe you just caught a bit of it in the background at a friend's house, and only now, years later, do you remember that Bobobo exists.
Now that's a man-sized meal.
Chances are, those that they had kick-ass openings, deranged plots, and something to sell you. Let's talk.
You know them. You love them. Your parents hate them. Except for the ones they grew up with. It's the merchandise-driven television franchise. Oh, you know the ones where the show is all like, I will use my new and definitely pre-planned power. And the commercials are all like, get the new Optimus Prime figure with power trailer and real marriage-saving action.
Only a Prime is strong enough to stop your parents from arguing. Megatron!
These things are a dime a dozen. All over the place. You could probably list a ton yourself. Thundercats, Masters of the Universe, Beat 'em On, countless others. Who among us could forget Bottle Man? You know, the one where the protag's name is Koga. Oh, Koga Koda? But for today, I want to talk about one that's pretty dear to me.
Bakugan!
Now picture this. You're a kid prone to getting fixated on certain things, and this rolls up on screen. Bakugan Battle Brawlers is a franchise that began in 2009 with a pretty simple premise.
Ball!
I'm not here to give you a history lesson. There are others for that. But suffice to say, it was pretty eye-catching at the time. Bakugan wanted a piece of that tabletop and monster card game market and made a splash there for a minute. Eventually, seasons changed and Bakugan passed, only to return 3 years ago. Up to present day, there are 3 generations of Bakugan, of which I'm only familiar with the first one. So now there's this really cool new thing that you manage to convince your parents to buy and you really get into, except for one problem. Your social prospects are this, and the friends you do have would rather talk about, I don't know, girls or something. There's no one around that wants to play. You're in the middle of nowhere, your brother's too old, your friends don't care. So you eventually grow up and give up, electing to leave behind memories you never got to make. But one thing you hadn't considered throughout that whole span of time was your other hyperfixation, video games. Now it's over a decade later. Can the games supplement the lack of social opportunity you had as a kid?
Nope.
Now before we get too into things, I should give a bit of a lowdown. Don't worry, it'll be brief. The basic gist of Bakugan is these monsters, these Bakugan, came to Earthrealm from another dimension along with a bunch of cards. Afterwards, a bunch of kids just built a game around it all, where the main goal is to take gate cards you set down by rolling your ball onto it and brawling it out, using extra ability cards to bigger your number. Biggest number takes the gate, 3 gates, and that's game. There's other stuff too, but we are here to play. If you need to know, links in the description. The big coolness of Bakugan comes from the fact that your pieces are these little spheres that roll and open up into their monster forms. Nowadays, this is still pretty cool to me, seeing how they fit the monster designs into the toy, which then folds into the sphere. Even if some of them, like, okay, how does this translate? I think the most far-fetched idea of this premise, in universe at least, is the idea that these elementary school kids were able to settle on clean rules for an organized game. Yo, how do you think these cross-dimensional, super-powered beings feel about losing their agency to a bunch of kids playing card games? No, you can't do that. No, you can't do that. No, that's not.
I was revered warrior of my people.
Let's take it from the top. Bakugan Battle Brawlers, released on all of the above. You sure you didn't want to throw in a Sega CD port for good measure? The most immediately interesting talking point of Bakugan, the game of the show of the game, is that not only is it dedicated to replicating the anime and look and feel, but also giving the player a genuine outlet to insert themselves into that world. Unless you're a girl. But to be fair, if you're playing Bakugan, Bakugan the video game. Girls were never part of the equation, but given the circumstances, there are enough options here to make representing yourself somewhat feasible. Plus, there's an Afro option. That's an automatic A, bare min. You're then given your own super-de-duper OC Bakugan named Leonidas, even getting to choose what faction he's in. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention his elemental factions. It's all what you think it be. Bakugan Battle Brawl... B3 also succeeds in making you feel like you're not just some silent stooge by having your character directly interact and even come into conflict with the main cast. So instead of Mary Sueing it up and having every established character drooling over your cock, you Mary Sue it up and everyone gets rightfully pissed that you rolled in from the non-canon zone and started goofing. And everyone gets in on it. Your character gets an arc with an understandable goal that I'm sure most fans of the show could jive with, even if the writing is hokey as shit.
It's true. I was born from the hate and despair of the Bakugan locked deep in the Doom Dimension. All I wanted was to take my anger out on other Bakugan. But I've changed since I've met you.
Me?
Yes. Thanks to you, I've learned the importance of friendship and trust.
We've learned from each other. Friends always do. Whatever happens, you'll always be my partner.
Alas, comes with the territory. There's even an edgelord rival to call your very own bro. My 10-year-old self is done for. The real question is, do I want to be a battle brawler? I mean, these are the kinds of people who shit-talk me IRL, but then pretend to be my friend online. Isn't that backwards? Don't you got that the other way around? Oh, except for Dan. He's cool. Alright, enough babbling. It's time for some battling. Now, base Gen 1 Bakugan has little in the way of genuine strategy. Hell, the elemental attributes each one has only really determines what boosts the cards give them. That wouldn't fly for 5 to 10 hours. Mercifully, the devs agreed and added some mechanics to allow player agency. Hark, what could that be, you ask innocently? Just between you and me, I'm playing the PS3 version. If I wanted to play the Wii version, I would have played the Wii version. In Bakugan, the game of the show of the game, you still set your gate cards down and roll the Bakugan. However, here you're given direct control after your throw, and you can roll them around for as long as you have the momentum and stamina. And of course, the PS3 version forces 6-axis controls because Layer didn't set enough of an example. Luckily, as I've stated before, my wrists tempered. This does allow for a variety of trick shots and cool maneuvers though, and when the gimmick arenas are introduced, you're even allowed to directly interfere with your opponent's shot, actually cheating and ruining the sanctity of Bakugan battle brawlers.
What?
Or you could just skip your opponent's turn, blessedly. This then becomes its own form of strategy. Do you watch your opponent's turn and try to disrupt it? Or do you save timing? But I wouldn't worry too much. Actually, as the difficulty ramps up, disruption starts becoming more viable as these guys will start building buffs from the arena and will not hesitate to gang up on you in a free-for-all. It's surprising how much flying all over the arena becomes more and more necessary as the game goes on because you don't want to go up against your opponents with your base power, trust me. Plus, the circus is funny. It's just, controlling the Bakugan with the 6-axis can feel kind of wonky. Like, it's responsive enough to mostly work, but I don't know, sometimes things like turning can feel a bit off, either turning not as tight as I want it to, or having me just sail off, which admittedly could be stat related. Look, it's hard to explain. Basically, 360 wins again. Armed with this knowledge, the loop ends up being going to the shop to buy cards, buy an upgrade Bakugan, then go do a tournament. Rinse, repeat, sprinkle a cutscene in here or there for taste. It's a good thing that the arenas themselves are all rather varied and the battles cycle between one-on-one, doubles, and free-for-all, so it does add some spice with each tournament. My thesis coming away from this game was that I played it a decade too late. That younger version of me would have adored this game to pieces. Being able to place myself into an accurate representation of the series is such a treat for a fan. Xenoverse 2 still gets updates. But being me now, so far removed from Bakugan for so long, the game's impressive, but it comes off more as cute and interesting than genuinely exciting. Makes me kinda sad. I heard talk of this game back in the day, and I wish I listened. Still worth a look for the novelty if you're a fan, because it's rare to see so much effort put into a licensed toy anime game, but it's not your next favorite. But where do we go from here? Probably more of the same, right? Well, maybe if you're on the DS. But for the rest of us, and DS owners too, god damn it, there's... Now, I'm sure there's someone who's like, blah, but this game doesn't do as well embracing the player with the world of Bakugan and properly emulating the physical game to provide a gateway. Defenders of the Core opts to be pretty base in that it lets you play as the Bakugan, pounding other Bakugan into mochi. This time it's based on the second season of the anime, which I am not personally familiar with, but I will ask. Who let this happen? Defenders brings over a few things from the first game like the OC, the A+ customization, and a narrative involving your character growing. But it's questionable if this is even the same kid. I mean, he's all buddy-buddy with the main characters here, but now he's some genius engineer nerd. See, in the original B3, your character was all Genki pro tag, I will achieve my dream with me and my partner no matter what. Now he's all...
This is exactly why I don't brawl. Something always goes wrong.
Honestly, this time the story around is way more akin to a Liquid, because it's not as solid. I mean, the last game's plot wasn't exactly the Way of Kings or anything, but at least it felt like a lost arc from the anime. Here it's just going through the paces, like legit, I think every cutscene just serves to set up some trope or another part of the hero's journey. Like the basic gist of the plot is that your Bakugan OC essentially becomes a chosen one because he was isekai'd into a bad end timeline where the bad guys take over Earth, and all the main cast has, let's see here, lost the ability to brawl.
They take away the ability to brawl.
Like they lost the abstract concept of tossing the ball out and it becoming big monster to play other big monsters. I can't, dude. Eventually we have a fall from grace and a call to action and a rival that mistrusts you and a comrade that secretly helps the bad guys. That isn't to say there isn't comedy here. Yes, if you give me the exact thing I need to enact my evil plan, I will definitely turn good.
Okay, I believe you.
Oh shit, I can't believe that worked. See ya. One thing Defenders doesn't bring over is the polish on the character models. Yeesh. Couple that with the lack of any official voice casting, I'm starting to wonder, is that really Dan? And Marucho, stop staring, bro, I'm getting uncomfy. The Bakugan, however, look great. Oh right, the Bakugan! Defenders is a lot more action heavy than its predecessor. The meat of the gameplay is an arena fighter style game with a focus on basic tower defense. You'll be dashing around the stage and making your foes wish that they only got sent to the Doom Dimension. Now the actual mechanics are rather basic. Ultimate Ninja Storm, this ain't. But the feel, how everything moves is what sells it. You see, I'm of the belief that an action game doesn't need deep mechanics to be fun. It just needs to feel good and leave enough room for the player to fill in the gaps. So while the actual system is extremely simple, the speed at which everything moves is very satisfying. Essentially, the game feels weighty enough to sell the scale, but fast enough to sell the intensity. You get a few basic combos, a block with a generous parry window, and some cooldown skills. Each Bakugan also specializes in different play styles, from drive-by blasting, to ground-based shooting, to being fucking worthless, to... My favorite is Percival, although my enemies may not agree with that choice. Master Ingrid is fun too. Her charge shot stuns the enemy long enough to follow up on and whoop-ah! Zipping up and down and all around just feels good, and recovery doesn't last a dog's age. You'll spend the mission defending monuments like Big Ben until the last guy's dead. And while a good variety of goons get tossed your way, it's all pretty easy. Except when they just start tossing shit at you. You can also upgrade your Bakugan with points found and earned, each Bakugan having different upgrades depending on their fighting style. The ability card cooldowns are a bit disappointing as everyone has essentially the same 3 skills with one unique one, making each moveset feel a tad homogenized. But only being able to select 2 to create a somewhat personalized playstyle for each Bakugan makes it feel worthwhile regardless. The tower defense missions give more for the player to do in this system while effectively utilizing 3D space in a style that a 2D game couldn't cleanly replicate. The arena fighter that truly justifies being 3D. Defenders wins every year. Okay, that's a bit much. It's not a goatee, but god damn if it isn't a fun one. Between the arenas are little stealth missions. You shouldn't expect MGS going into these because really, I know you're smarter than that. Nah, it's pretty rudimentary all things considered. Hard vision cones, basic looping patterns, the works. You are handed a couple tools to work with, but that's it. Ah, fuck it, I'll take these freaks on myself. Eh. Really, I'm not even sure how these guys took over so well considering their terrible tunnel vision, poor scouting drones, and robots that have buttons that relocate them. NPCs will sometimes dot these areas, and talking to them can get you these literal get-out-of-jail-free cards. For future reference though, cool it on the accents.
Some fish for dinner tonight. My wife's gonna let me have it.
The saving grace for these segments is that they're all rather short. Even when you take the time to look for everything, and you should, it rarely takes more than a couple minutes before you're back to bashing. Then the ending throws you the Super Giga Drago form from the tutorial and puts you against the Big Bad's Hyper Mega form, and it's anime, and it's stupid, and it's fun, and it's amazing! Alright, you lined up and boom! Oh, shit! And after you clear the story, you unlock the bad Bakugan. You can play them in a New Game Plus where you find the pieces to make the Super Ultimate Mega Bad Bakugan available now at these fine retailers! It's so easy to go into these licensed games with literally zero expectations, which is why it's always so surprising when I find one that actually has quality placed in it, even if one of them is just bonk bonk caveman time. Fun is fun, and it should be noted that the devs behind these games aren't exactly nobodies. They've worked on all kinds of high-profile works like Sonic Adventure DX, the Genesis Splatterhouse sequel, Sonic Riders, the PS1 Goemon games, and oh, I don't know, all the mainline Katamari games. It's really nice to see when devs take even licensed games seriously, because it's not like properties don't deserve it. Fans don't deserve anything but to be admitted. However, to give a fan such an interactive outlet to engage with their favorite media instead of just cashing out, that says a lot. That's putting in the work. That's cooking. That's giving 100%. And this carries across all the different platforms, including the DS versions of both games, which try their damnedest to be as close to the console experience as possible, going so far to keep the custom characters and following the same plot beats with the same cutscenes. I made myself cool this time. Defender's DS is impressive on its own, being fairly accurate to the console versions minus the obvious compromises, and succeeding in being a somewhat fast-paced 3D arena brawler on the DS. The DS version of the first game deserves some words, though. Instead of purely trying to keep with the consoles, they instead remixed the gameplay to better fit the DS hardware. See, the DS is kinda small and weak. So instead of trying to squish all these huge crazy arenas into the game, they did a bit of downsizing. With the more compact arenas, Bakugan now have slower, tighter controls to navigate the space, in addition to utilizing the magnets that IRL Bakugan have as an in-game mechanic. In order for the Bakugan to stand in this version, the magnet has to hit the gate card. This makes where your Bakugan stands actually important because you could potentially block your own double stand if you aren't careful, on top of rolling into other Bakugan, now potentially taking them out altogether. The special arenas also got some retooling to be a bit more focused in their console counterparts. So in essence, the lesser hardware led the devs to slow and tighten the roll phase to more closely resemble the actual Bakugan tabletop game. Like, I don't even know what to say other than this team really cared about delivering Bakugan in digital form, and it feels so good that this exists as it does, and so bad that I missed out on it in my youth. But what if? What if these games were made by a team known for quality titles, but with less budget, or time, or care? I don't quite know how to properly word my thoughts with this one. I mean, I don't want to be mean, but no amount of prefacing will make this any easier. Look at it. This is the WayForward devved, Nintendo-endorsed Bakugan game released exclusively for Nintendo Switch to coincide with the resurrection of the franchise in 2020. Alright, let's be charitable here. Champions of Vestroia deserves genuine praise for trying to tie back into the original B3 by giving a custom pro tag and even bringing Leonidas back. That is, actually extremely cool and shows that the devs at least had the fans of the original game in mind during development. But, well, let me put it this way. This game is exactly like what people out of the know would imagine when you say Bakugan video game. It looks cheap, it runs like a Tecmo Koei PC port, and it's overall a very mediocre product. Not even funny bad. I should at least explain what it's going for. So Champions basically starts with you and your friends running across the Bakugan in the woods, and after picking through a list of much weaker designed Bakugan, you then set out on a quest to be a battle brawler and beat up a CEO or something. You're given lessons by Dan Kozo? You guys own the property, you don't have to bootleg your own protagonists! Oh buddy, ask me again. Brawls have been revamped into this weird real-time system where you run around and lob hexes at your Bakugan until they have enough energy to activate an ability. Then rinse and repeat until the enemy stops moving. I don't hate this idea. It's at least interesting and keeps the player engaged for the fight, ideally. But it's so bare, like this isn't just undercooked. It's fresh from the like raw. And seriously, these designs, they're so much lamer. I mean, the original had Fear Ripper. You don't forget Fear Ripper. Oh, and I checked ahead and yeah, it doesn't get much more complicated, which is a shame because I think the style could work if it were tweaked a bit. Maybe add some way for the player and their opponent to directly interact and interfere with each other. Maybe add some obstacles in the space. Basically, what I'm saying is let me punch his fucking lights out. I get it. Sometimes you gotta take these kinds of projects to pay the bills, and it isn't always pretty. But the precedent!
This was fun, reconciling with that little bit of my past, and I came away thinking, hey, these things are still pretty neat. So I won't lament about a history that doesn't exist, memories unmade. I'll instead look forward to the memories that I can still make. And at least I have some games that give me a glimpse at what I missed. It might be too late for me to reignite that spark I had as a child, but I will say right here, right now, one last time. Bakugan, Brawl!
That was a nice distraction.